Welcome back to the Moll Anderson Show. Well, just recently, I did the doctors again, and I always love doing my house calls with the doctor. It's always fun. But this time it was a little more serious because I talked about a very personal experience when my stepson Chase had a stroke. And we went through a long, lengthy time in a hospital, and it was a pretty devastating experience, and we had to learn to survive. Well, strangely enough, and unfortunately, you think it wouldn't happen to anybody else, but my very good friend and my go-to gossip girl, Tara Hitchcock, has gone through a very similar experience. Tara, are you there?
Yeah, I am. And, we've talked about this before. I've been pretty blessed with timing, to be honest with you, but I think the best example of great timing in my life, believe it or not, was when my stepson had a massive brain hemorrhage that was timed pretty perfectly because we had been out of the country 2 weeks prior, and we happened to be in Phoenix. He happened to be at a scouting event where there were doctors present. They were able to take him immediately to the hospital. He was air-evac'd to Barrow Neurological Institute, put in a coma for days, ICU, 4 brain surgeries, months in the hospital, over a year of rehab. So in a strange way, very well timed. But just like you found out with your family, it's you never really think it's going to happen to you. You do stories on hospitals in the area, and you meet doctors, and then all of a sudden you're in that situation.
Well, I'm telling you, and just the same thing with us. It's such an amazing thing. There were so many miracles. I mean, Chase had lived in Hong Kong, and we had just had Christmas. And literally, if he had gone back to Hong Kong and not gone to the beach with his mother for a couple extra days, he would have been in a factory somewhere, and they would not have known what was happening to him, and he probably would not have survived. So it's really amazing when you hear, and you don't think about all the miracles that happen on a daily basis. There are miracles happening right this minute, Tara,
Oh, I know, and recovery, and especially for something like Chase, and in my case, Dylan, what's so interesting about recovery, especially if it involves the brain, is a lot of recovery really physically hurts. It is painful, and at least in our case, the key for Dylan was trying as hard as we could to get him back up, sitting up, standing up, learning how to walk again quickly. And if you've had a brain injury, that is very, very painful. And as a caregiver, your instinct is to not want to see somebody in pain, is to not want somebody to scream out, I'm hurting. Your instinct is to, okay, we'll just go back to bed, lay down, feel better. But you have to, the key to recovery sometimes is the painful part of pushing and sucking it up. And, in our case, I remember for days Dylan would look at me and go, I hate you, I hate your guts. And I'd go, well, I love you, buddy. But it's hard. It's hard for those around the person recovering. It's taxing on the caregivers in the hospital who are saints, in my opinion. You've got to seek out some really good ones, and sometimes you got to weed through some not so good ones and find those who are patient and strong. And you really do. You learn a whole. Anyone who's been through anything involving a loved one, you learn a lot very quickly.
Well, if you're just joining me, I am talking with Tara Hitchcock, who's normally my go-to gossip girl and giving us the latest in Hollywood and on film. But Tara and I shared an experience where both of our stepsons had brain injuries. And Tara, what's amazing and people don't understand, and why I did this show, The Doctors, was I really wanted people to understand about taking care of the people who are taking care of the patient. Because what happens is nobody knows what to do. I mean, it was so amazing to me. People would call and they would really want to know, and they wanted updates all the time. They didn't realize that we couldn't maybe just stop and do that. All the things that happen, they send flowers, but you can't have flowers in the ICU. And so I thought, I wanted to come up with a survival guide so that people knew what they would need or what they could bring to somebody who's in the hospital, because really the family is in their own trauma.
That's a great point. For us, the other interesting thing, and this is a whole other episode, the other interesting thing for us was it really took a toll on our marriage. And you would think sometimes these things bring, couples closer, and sometimes they do. In my case, it had almost the opposite effect. It was bad. And it got so bad. It was almost like the day Dylan was released from the hospital, things with my husband and I completely changed back to the better. But in the meantime, it was just the stress. And men handle it differently than women handle it, as you know. For us, the whole idea of having to keep people posted, that's why something like Caring Bridge is so valuable. My husband, who is such a great writer, you know all about it. It's a great resource for people.
Well, and explain Caring Bridge so that our listeners can understand what that is.
Gosh, it's just fantastic. It's a website. It's a website set up where literally you can log on, you can create an account for your loved one, you can post pictures, you can post updates, and that way everybody, instead of having to call you and then their feelings are hurt if you don't call them back and you can't keep everybody posted, it's an easy way for everybody to stay posted. Now, in most cases, Caring Bridge is pretty basic. Like today he got out of bed and he walked. In my husband's case, he is such a great writer, it almost became cathartic for him. He turned it into this little outlet for himself that helped him, where he could, write a story. And it was really helpful to him. And as a result, everybody that read it, everybody who read his Caring Bridge would call me and go, you have got to tell Ken to write a book. He has got to write more. I mean, you would cry, you would laugh. So my husband's Caring Bridge entries were these fantastic little mini stories that it was like watching a little movie where you couldn't wait to read the next one. For him, it became a release that he really needed, getting to your point about helping those who are caring for the others. And he's a pretty tough guy. He's a young guy, solves everything. He's the rock. My stepson's brain hemorrhage completely turned him upside down. So
well, of course. I mean, that's their child is laying there. And it's now let's talk about this because, you and I are both the stepmom. And so it's interesting because people react so strangely sometimes thinking that, you don't love and care as much about your stepchild as you would your own son, and so people can react differently. And then you also have to deal with ex-wives in the same situation. And of course, I know your situation was different from mine. Mine was, luckily we had just come together as a family before it happened. And so my trepidation about going into the hospital was a total release, thank God. And I had to learn to just step back and allow my husband and his ex-wife to be the parents. And so I ended up taking care of them. Now, what happened in your situation?
My situation, I think, is very unique. My husband's ex-wife and I are polar opposites. She is a very nice person, very much an enabler. Her instinct is to cuddle, not let anyone get hurt, bring soup if you're sick. That kind of a thing, whereas I am very proactive, very pushy, very in your face, very...
No.
So in Dylan's recovery, it was actually a good thing to have both, but yet going back to my point earlier about needing Dylan to get up and work through it, it actually was difficult. We had, several nurses came to me and said, you've got to keep her out of the room. She's not helping the situation at all, and we need to get him up. So in that case, there were times where her being there actually was counterproductive because she never wanted to see Dylan in pain or screaming out, whereas I had no issues, putting him through this because I knew what the result would be, and I didn't care how many times he hated my guts or told me to leave. I'm not going anywhere, and he's getting up. So in a strange way, and I don't know, I honestly don't think I would have been any different had I been his biological mother, because that's just the way I am anyway.
Yeah, you are who you are.
Yeah, you are who you are. But it was an interesting dichotomy. The good news is, at the end of the day, just like at the end of the day, you've got this kid who has 3 people who adore him, and you want him, A, to survive, and B, to thrive.
That's right.
So at the end of the day, even though there were definitely moments that were challenging, days I thought, oh, man, I hope she's not here today because this is going to be an uphill battle.
Right.
At the end of the day, you've got a kid with 3 people who adore him, and you always remember that. We had a schedule where we all were on shifts. We all took turns. I saw her every single day. I was in a room with her every single day. That was the most I talked to her, and I've known my husband for 10 years. So you're forced in the situation. It was cordial. It was fine. And you're there for one main goal.
That's right. So you're able to focus,
unique.
yes.
I mean, unlike you where you kind of let them take over, I was actually the one that had taken over. So, but I think that just that speaks to how pushy I can be, and my relationship is a little bit different with and I got the kids when they were much younger than when you ended up, with Chase as a stepson and some of the other kids.
Well, and in my situation, I ended up taking care of all the kids and Beth and Charlie. So it kept things interesting. But, I think that, so I guess what I want to really, get from this today is that, number one, we just never know. I mean, what are the chances that you and I would both have stepsons that would go through this trauma and then we would live in the hospitals and go through this kind of time, which is very stressful, like you said, on marriages, and very stressful just in general. And I want people to stop and think every second right now that we're sitting here, there is someone on their way to a hospital. There's someone who's going through a trauma. There's someone who's alone. We met people, Tara, that were in the ICU room who were completely alone. There was a little woman named Romaine who was 87 years old, and she couldn't figure out who was who. She would look over and say, I can't imagine who's married to who there and whose kids are who. I mean, she could just see this going on her face, and she called Charlie over and she said, now, which one are you married to? And he goes, well, I was married to her, but I'm married to her now. And she just was amazed, and she started to talk about how she was alone. And I really believe that God puts us in situations. And so we started taking care of Romaine too. But I just want people to remember that you never know. And if you get a phone call that a friend has a family member that is going through a trauma in the hospital, you need to remember to help take care of your friend. And the best thing you can do is, there's so many different things you can do. Offer to take their dog, offer to come pick up their laundry, offer to take in their mail, offer to go clean out the refrigerator because everything's going bad. It's the things that doesn't have to cost money. So if you don't have money, it's not about that. It's just thinking about those things. We had to have sweats. It was freezing in ICU, and we were in Florida. We were living in a state that we didn't live in, so that was really tough on us. But I'm so glad you shared your story today, because it was amazing to me when I heard you were going through the same thing, and that we would both have this happen. And I just thought, who better to share this with today, and to share to my listeners that it is possible that things happen, and we've got to be grateful for every day, but to just give a little extra thought and care, and maybe take a care package or something to their friend,
It's cute what you said about flowers. Flowers are beautiful, honestly, but what I learned is food. Bake some cookies, bring a meal,
water.
All those little things that you mentioned, water, things that you do that you forget. And how fortunate, again, in our case, we had 3 people on rotating shifts.
Yes.
Like you mentioned, your friend Romaine, there's nobody. There are people with already holding down 2 jobs, raising other kids, that now have a loved one in the hospital.
Yeah, and they have to go to work. They have to go,
they have to work. It's amazing to me. So, yes, anything you can do. And don't ever take no for an answer. Your friend says, oh, we're fine. Don't believe them.
Yeah.
Just suck it up. Get down there. Help them do something. Because everybody wants to be strong, and sometimes they don't want to inconvenience friends, and they feel like they're just going to inconvenience somebody else. But take the extra step, and like you said, something that you would never think about, the dog, the laundry, anything.
Right.
Just be there, and it will speak volumes. It will really help.
Well, Tara Hitchcock, thank you for sharing your story today.
Thanks, Moll.
And hopefully somebody will hear this and maybe go take care of a friend today. Thanks, Tara.